Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Everyone that saw me yesterday and other AMAs know that I love that music. I love to dance to that music before I get started. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you've had a wonderful time at the last 2 full days of just Microsoft Suite. All the tools that we're bringing to you, and all the information, and all of our experts that you had a chance to chat with. Thanks so much for joining us. I am joined today. My name is Joe Lurie, and I'm on a team called the Intune Customer Acceleration Customer Experience team. I'm not really that important in this call, so I have three people with me that are way more important than me. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves from the top down. So I see Alucci, Kara, and Jess in that order. So go ahead and introduce yourselves, and then we'll get started answering questions.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Alucci. I'm the PM working on Tunnel for MAM as well as Tunnel MDM. Excited to get you guys questions for today. I'll pass it on to Kara.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Kara. I am a product manager, part of the Microsoft Intune group. I'm responsible for Windows Remote Help as well as Mac. And I'm going to pass it on to Jess.
Awesome. Hey, Jessica Yang. I'm a senior product manager on the Intune engineering team. I've worked on all kinds of Android management experiences, and for the Intune Suite, I'm responsible for Android remote help.
Cool. And it's so nice to work with you all. I've attended your sessions earlier today. I've talked to you all with my own customer conversations, and it's so nice to be able to answer these questions. We're going to get started right away. We already have a question that came from Gordon. And Jess, I'm going to bring this to you because I know you talked about this in your session earlier today. When will the unattended control RBAC, or role-based access control, permission for remote help be available? I saw that in your demo. You showed that there is a unattended. When will that become available?
Yeah. Right, that's not in the console right now because the feature isn't out yet. And so, the glib answer is the permission will be available when the feature is available.
Okay.
It will be there. It's just for, because it's not actually going to do anything right now. We just haven't turned it on in the console yet.
So that control, so we know that we have RBAC, we have role-based controls for full control, elevate, and view only. And now, so we have a fourth one. For those of you that may not have seen the session earlier, we have a fourth one for unattended. And so we know that Android, which is in private preview today, remote help for Android's in private preview, will have that unattended. And Kara, I think I remember another question about Windows remote help and having unattended. Is that going to be the same RBAC for when that's available in Windows? And do you have any idea about, rough idea when that might become available?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. So for Windows Remote Help, unattended sessions is high on our priority. So I can't provide an ETA yet for when unattended support will be released for Windows Remote Help, but we're thinking about how we would introduce that for Windows, and the RBAC would be the same for Windows and Android.
Great, thanks. And thanks, Gordon, for that question. We have a question from Nick furthering on that with unattended remote help. What happens if there's a reboot at some point during that remote help session? And so his question is, will remote help unattended allow for auto reconnect if a device is restarted during maintenance or troubleshooting or something like that? And Jessica, we'll go to you first on that because, I think it'll be available on Android probably earlier than Windows.
Yeah. So that's definitely something we've talked about on the engineering team. I don't have anything to share right now, but if you can actually give a little more information about, when you expect these reboots to happen, the behavior that you would like to see, you can give that feedback to us on the feedback side. I think we can put a link
right here.
Yeah.
You're already on it, Joe.
Yeah. So please, give us more detail on that scenario. We're definitely thinking about it.
Yeah, it's a great point. We have a lot of scenarios that our engineers and our developers and Jess and Karen and Lucci have thought about, but we have a lot of scenarios that we probably haven't thought about. And so that Intune feedback, aka.ms Intune feedback link you just saw on the page is a great place to give us your use cases where you currently use different tools or where you would love to see our tool going in the future. We have another comment from David that basically it's a shout out to Kara. The new OneDrive settings catalog for Mac OS. works great, and we have started using it in production. And probably that's because you mentioned Mac OS as part of your introduction. You said remote help for Windows in Mac OS. So I'm sure that's why he's giving you that feedback, but thanks, David, for that.
Thanks, David.
Yeah. Lucci, we have a question about Tunnel for MAM, and the question is from Carolina. Do we need to create a dedicated Microsoft Tunnel to use Tunnel for MAM? And while you answer that, why don't you talk about the difference between Microsoft Tunnel and Tunnel for MAM and how they may or may not integrate together?
Yeah, so thank you so much for the question. To kind of start things off, I'm assuming that question was posed to if they needed to create another like Linux environment to extend from there, or if they needed to just if they can use their existing one. So if that is the question, you can extend your current tunnel support, and you just have to add in. We have the app configuration policy as well as your app protection policy, and Tunnel for MAM actually extends the current Tunnel VPN gateway. So, but we're just adding support for devices, so they don't need to enroll into Microsoft. You don't need to have an enrolled device. So Tunnel for MAM and the current what we have is some of the key differences is that these are for personal devices that don't want to enroll their devices. So you can extend your current tunnels environment. Hope that answers your question.
I think it's a good point to bring up too, where you said it extends on your current Linux setup. I've had customers ask me, wait, so I need to have Microsoft Tunnel enabled before I can enable Tunnel for MAM? Is that part of the setup? Yes, right, that is part of the setup.
You do, exactly. You do need your Linux environment first, and then you can build on top of that and extend past. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thanks. And Kara, we have a question from David that I'm not sure we'll be able to answer, but when will remote help support unattended connections for both PC, Windows, and Mac OS? It's very essential for them in their environment.
Thanks for the question and the feedback. We definitely recognize that unattended support is very high, a high ask from our customers. So like I said before, for Windows, we have that high on a priority list. I can't provide an ETA for that. And for Mac remote help, what we are working tirelessly to ship is the first version for Mac remote help, which is going to be view only. And we're aiming to ship this publicly this year.
Great. This calendar year. Right.
Yes, this calendar year. And unintended support we definitely recognize that this is high priority, and we will be working on that as well.
Great, thanks, Karen. Thanks for that question. Jess, we have a question about Android remote help and in the enrollment types. Will Android remote help, and I just scrolled off my screen, sorry about that. Is Android remote help going to be available on other enrollment types? For example, corporate owned, fully managed user devices. Is there a specific enrollment type for Android or all enrollment types?
Right. That's a really good question. So in case you missed the session, right now Android Remote Help is only going to be available on Android Enterprise dedicated devices. That's the first scenario that we're starting with. We are definitely looking at the other enrollment types as well. I would say there are kind of some, because each enrollment type is kind of associated with a different scenario, there are different, for example, privacy concerns that we may have to think about, and just how we want remote help to work in those scenarios. So it's not quite as straightforward as just taking what we have now and extending it as is to the other enrollment modes. But I believe it was corporate owned, fully managed that was in the question. That's definitely something that we're looking at.
Great, thanks. And it's good to point out, because something like Windows you enroll a Windows device, but with Android there are different enrollment types available, and we have our customers using not only a variety of them, but inside each customer there's a variety of enrollment types for Android devices as well. And knowing which enrollment types will have remote help and which ones won't it'll be essential for them.
Yeah,
so
great question. Would love to hear more about the scenarios in that feedback area that we have.
Thanks so much. We have a question from, and I apologize apologize if I pronounce this incorrectly. I'm going to say Pascal, about remote help and the different tenants and helping people in other tenants. And Kara, it's a kind of a long question, so I'll try to summarize and break it up a little bit. But for remote help, is it necessary for the supporter or the helper to have a device in the same tenant as the sharer or the customer? Or can you give help to any tenant in a multi-tenant environment? And if it is in any tenant, and this part goes into licensing, and I'm just going to say that the sharer and the helper both need to be licensed for remote help. And in the case of Pascal, I had issues connecting to remote help. One of our customers, my code was never accepted, neither was an internal, nor with my CSP account. So we had to fall back to other solutions to test it with. So how does that work in a cross-tenant or a multi-tenant environment?
That's a great question. So for remote help today, we only support the remote assistant session connections if the sharer and the helper is in the same tenant and in the same organization.
That's for enrolled devices, but we still help with unenrolled devices, correct?
Yes, we still do help devices that are unenrolled. When you have an unenrolled device, you will have to start the session from the helper and the sharer's device outside of Intune, and then what happens is you exchange the session codes, and then you get connected in a session.
Great, thanks. And funny, just semantic wise, just to say, I was talking to my friend, my colleague, my former manager, Kwok, about unenrolled devices, and we think semantic and grammar, we think of an unenrolled device as a device that was enrolled and now it's not anymore, it's unenrolled. But really, we're talking about non-enrolled devices and devices that simply just never were enrolled as well, right? So non-enrolled device. So I just, we were joking about that and the difference between unenrolled and non-enrolled. All right, so we have a question from Mark. Can we please get remote help added to the new Microsoft Store in Intune? I don't think that's word feedback, and that's great feedback. And I'll talk about that myself because some of you may know my name as a Store for Business guy. So can we please get this added to the new Store for Business in Intune? This way we can easily push the app. And it's great feedback because that is something that the store team started to work on and then got sidetracked by other things. So the remote help app itself is a Win32 app, so it can be downloaded, it can be packaged as an Intune Win, and it can be added, it can be deployed that way. It's the same way you doing all of your other Win32 apps. One other thing that I'd love to get your feedback on is, and please enter your feedback in aka.ms Intune feedback. That was here a minute ago, and we'll put it back again. Add your feedback there about maybe getting it added into the catalog for the advanced app management. And Danny Guillory did a session on advanced app management yesterday, and we can put that link up as well. So maybe we can, it's great feedback. Add your feedback there so that we can maybe get it added to the store, maybe get it added to the catalog. Or again, right today, you can still download it. You can wrap it with an Intune Win file like you do your other Win32 apps and deploy it that way. But David, it is great feedback. And I'm sorry, Mark, it was great feedback. You're not the first one that we've heard that from. All right, so we have more feedback from David. Please build remote help central dashboard into Microsoft 365 Lighthouse. And again, that goes towards that CSP, it goes towards that cross-tenant, multi-tenant. This is the main place for service providers to manage devices, and having remote help built in would make it sell like hotcakes. What are your thoughts about that? And I'll ask you all your thoughts about, because in this case, it's probably not just remote help. It's maybe we're talking about tunnel for MAM and policies and whatnot. So let's talk about that. We'll start with the remote help question. So Carol, we'll start with you on your thoughts about Lighthouse.
Yeah, thanks, David, for the feedback. This is something that we have in the backlog, and we have considered and heard from customers to provide remote help support specifically for SMB businesses. So for that, since it has been a customer ask, this is something that we are considering down the road to provide support for service providers.
Great, thanks, Kara. Jess, you have anything to add? I know it's probably the same answer, right?
Yeah, no, same thing. Like that's totally great feedback. Having that kind of centralized visibility, single pane of glass, totally makes sense. Yeah.
Alucci, have you had the same kind of feedback when you're thinking about tunnel for MAM? Talking to your customers?
Yeah, no. So We haven't had this feedback just yet, but this is something that customers are interested in. Definitely let us get that feedback in so we can add it to our backlog and work towards something.
Great, thanks. We do have a question about tunnel for MAM that just came in. How can we detect or decide really whether to establish tunnel outside corporate network or to establish tunnel inside corporate network? Should an internal service be set up for this?
That's an interesting question here. I guess I'd be interested to know a little bit more about their environment, what they're trying to accomplish. I guess when I hear the question, I'm thinking about where their sites are, like again, like what are they trying to establish? I would need some more detail on this question. I would need some more detail on this
That's
question.
great. So, and I'm sorry, I don't actually see who posted that question, but if you could add some more detail, we can either talk about it if we have time permits at the end of the session, or we can, keep your questions coming, and the feedback, the comment section here will be open through Friday, so we'll be able to add more comments to there as well.
It seems like they may be asking about where to put their where they should put their Linux server. But yeah, I feel like that's the question they're asking. But let me get some more information on that first before answering that.
All right, thanks. I appreciate that. And again, keep your comments coming. And for those of you watching this not live, but you're watching the recording, the comment section will be open through Friday of this week, which I think is 12, 13, 14, April 14th-ish. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but somewhere around that date, we'll continue to answer questions. All right, we have a question here from, I'm going to say, again, I apologize, but I'm going to say Yannick or Janik. My biggest question regarding tunnel, so Lucci, for you, is still why should I use tunnel if I can get the same with Azure App Proxy? And that's a fantastic question. It's way easier to maintain and it works with Windows and Mac devices. Why would I use tunnel instead of Azure App Proxy?
Oh, there's definitely a lot to discuss with this topic, definitely, because on the Azure App Proxy side, it kind of requires each endpoint to be defined. But then on the MAM tunnel side, it's more of a VPN into like the corporate network. So there's like a wider breadth of network access. But tunnel can be integrated directly into those specific line of business apps. And there's just a few different reasons here. This is a really good question. And we would have to dive more into it because like there's pros and cons for different solutions, but it kind of goes back into what you're looking for. But definitely, I think that on the tunnel side, there's more possibilities. But yeah, no, that's a really good question, and we would have to I don't know if we even have enough time to dive into some of the pros and cons. But definitely, just to highlight some of tunnel's pros and cons is that if you're specifically looking to access internal sites with personal devices that have not been enrolled and don't want to future being rolled into the system. I would definitely recommend Tunnel for MAM, especially for unenrolled devices. And then when we think about too on like the setup and I don't know how you want to move forward with that, but yeah, that's a great question, and I could definitely see that. I hope that I don't know. Maybe we should have a separate discussion on the pros and cons of, or I guess Tunnel for MAM versus Azure App Proxy.
It doesn't have to be one or the other, right? I mean,
exactly,
if you have Windows and Mac OS, you're not using Tunnel for MAM anyway. So, right, it doesn't have to be one or the other. And many customers will choose to use both depending on different use cases.
Exactly. The use cases are very important. So it depends too. Are you using mostly Windows and Mac OS products, or if it's like Android and iOS, that's definitely the great use case for Tunnel for MAM. So going back to what devices you're using, as well as the use cases that you would prefer. But I think iOS, Android definitely. But it's not a competition. You could definitely use both depending on the scenarios you have.
Thanks for that. And we just posted up there. Hey, do you think this is a good topic for a future blog post? Probably it is a good. If it's too long to discuss in this 5 minutes or whatever we have here, then probably it's a good topic for a future blog post.
So no, thank you for that. I guess I forgot who posed the question, but definitely appreciate it.
It was a great question, yeah, and I think it is important. There's a lot of our solutions that we're building into Intune Suite that are either Windows only or Windows, like remote help is Windows and Android right now, and Mac eventually, and MAM Tunnel is iOS and Android and not Windows. So I don't think there'll ever be a time where we say you have to only use this one solution and this is the one use case. We have lots of solutions and lots of use cases. So it is a great topic to start to unpack. All right, we have a question from Robert, and this might be, I'm going to ask it to you, Kara, first. And it might be probably, again, another topic for a future blog post. A useful adjunct feature for remote help would be a remote console feature to allow a remote background shell session on Windows like PowerShell or Mac, Bash, to allow helpers to start an interactive command line session in a user or system root context without any actual interactions. Kind of with the unattended, but instead of actually using the app, kind of doing it from the background, doing it through remote PowerShell or remote Bash. Any thoughts to integrating that or how that might work, or have there been thoughts to adding that kind of a scenario?
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thanks, Robert, for the question there. So from my perspective, I'm not sure if I've actually heard of this sort of use case before for remote help. So I would love to learn more about this and specifically about this adjunct feature and to help you fulfill like what you need from remote help.
Yeah, David, it's a great question, and because your question came through the tech community, and we all have accounts on tech community. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. We can it's like kind of take this offline, take it offline into a direct message to get some more information, and we'll definitely follow up with you on that. We have a feature request from a feature request that just came in, and I'm going to actually need maybe a little more clarity, Louis, on this. Or Louis, I apologize. In the U.S., somehow we call LUIS. We just say Louis, like Louis. So, Louis, if you could give us a little more scenario here. What about location fences for devices and device remote control in Intune? Is this something on the table now? And have we thought about maybe? I look at those maybe talking about geofencing or geolocation. Is that something that we've thought about with specific to remote control? Is the question, but what do you think? What do you think about that?
I'm a little bit confused by the question as well. So if Louis, you can provide a bit more detail in the comments. We'll be going in and looking at them afterwards.
Exactly.
Because it does seem to me like the geofencing piece of it and the remote assistance are two separate things. So I'm interested in hearing more about what the overlap there is.
Well, let's if we can unpack that. I think we have a couple minutes to unpack that. What about using something like a conditional access? You can, is that all? If we start thinking about conditional access compliance policies with remote help, can we say something like, hey, you can only remote into this device if it's within this IP range, or can we do something like that? Would that work? I'm just guessing where Louis is going with that.
Yeah, I can comment out on this for Windows Remote Help, since that is one of the features that we introduced during the Windows Remote Help session on the feature roadmap. So we are introducing conditional access for Windows Remote Help, and with that, we can lock access to remote help to a specific region or a subset of IP addresses.
And Jess, did you want to add anything to that?
I've been talking with Kara about it for Android, so
yeah.
All right, great. We have a question from Yusuf about integrating remote help, and we know that remote help sort of integrates with ServiceNow. That's in public preview. You can do the ServiceNow connection, and all you need to remote help license. But this question is, can I integrate remote help with other ITSM solutions like SolarWinds ITSM? What else is on the table there with integrating remote help?
That's a great question. I think Dave would be the better PM to speak about this, since he is the PM who's owning the ServiceNow integration with Intune and also remote help. So I'm actually not sure about the answer to this question here.
All right, thanks. And Dave Randall joined us. He was on this morning's session with Remote Help for Windows. He was on yesterday's session for for I believe the keynote, the kickoff. So he's been on a couple different sessions, so you can find him here in this Tech Accelerator. But also, I'd love to get more feedback, because you said, such as SolarWinds, but if you're using other ITSMs, would love to know about those as well. So again, go back to that feedback link and aka.ms Intune feedback to tell us what other solutions you're looking to integrate remote help with, or other scenarios you're looking at with Tunnel for MAM and all the other Intune Suite solutions. aka.ms Intune feedback is a place to give us those feature requests. We do have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to ask quickly, and this is really going to be for Just First, what about frontline worker devices, and how are we integrating remote help with frontline worker devices? And I'm starting with you because I see a lot of my customers using Android for frontline worker. And is that really the scenario that we're looking at with remote help for Android, or is it, all devices with Android?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think this also kind of relates back to the question earlier about the different management modes. We're definitely starting with looking at supporting these frontline workers with typically Android Enterprise dedicated enrolled devices, just because a lot of the time these devices are in situations where you may not have kind of a conventional IT support environment around, and so the ability to remotely access and perform operations on these devices gets very important. So yeah, definitely starting with that, but we're aiming to support all types of scenarios, all types of workers, so not just frontline workers in the future. Yep,
thanks. And Kara, I'm going to continue on that with you, because David actually asked this in the chat. What about HoloLens devices? Is that something that we've considered with remote help for Windows? Is HoloLens part of that as well?
That's a super cool question. So to comment on that question, HoloLens is something that we are testing out right now, but we would have to get back to you on whether that's supported or not.
All right, cool. I love that scenario, so thanks for asking that. We have time for one final question. We actually may have time for one final question. This one actually came to us from Twitter. Does Tunnel for MAM work with all browsers, or is there a specific browser that's required?
Yeah, no, great question. So there's actually on iOS and on Android, there's a few key differences to call out here. On iOS, there is an additional SDK that customers have to integrate with their line of business applications, as well as like applications in general, in order for Tunnel for MAM iOS to work with that. Right now, we've already done that additional work with Edge. So Edge already works with Tunnel for MAM. And then on the Android side, we require both the MAM SDK as well as MSOL integration for applications to work with Tunnel for MAM on Android. So I guess to answer the question more broadly is, like, right now, Tunnel for MAM works with Edge. The other browsers may need to do additional work in order to have support for those for Tunnel for MAM.
And that's something that the customer would do. They would. Yep. Okay, great.
Yeah, in regards to integrating on iOS the additional SDK, and then as well as the MSOL and MAM SDK. So there is additional work for other browsers in order for them to work for Tunnel for MAM.
Great, thanks. And thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. We've got just a couple minutes left to say goodbyes. I want to say thank you to everyone that attended all these sessions. To catch up on all these sessions, just find us at aka.ms/Intune Tech Accelerator, I believe is the link. I just saw it flash across the screen a second ago. Yep, Intune/Tech Accelerator. So to catch up on all the sessions, again, the feedback, the comments are going to be open until Friday, so we'll continue to answer those comments. So if you missed a session and you watch it on demand, go ahead and still post your questions through Friday. I'd love to keep this going. We just don't have time. So any final thoughts? We'll start with Alucci and then down to Kara and then over to Jess.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate all the engagement from the audience, the questions, the feedback. We're definitely looking out for any more feedback you guys have for the upcoming weeks. So keep them coming. We're definitely reading.
Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for your feedback, for engagement during these sessions. I would say that the best part about being a PM is just engaging with customers and having some sort of direct feedback on how our products are doing. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, same. Great questions, great engagement. I'm really excited. Looking forward to people being able to try this, all of the cool stuff that we announced. And also shout out to whoever complimented my keyboard in the Android remote help session. And if you didn't watch the session, then this is great excuse to go back, watch the whole session, so that you can see what that person was talking about.
All right. Thanks, everyone. And thank you all for joining us, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Enjoy.